about ePortfolios for the teacher job search. Get excited. Yes. Liz Kolb, she's a clinical associate professor here at SOE. I know a lot of you do know her. She has kindly come here while on sabbatical to do this presentation for you. So I'm very excited for her to impart all of the good advice she has. I have a handout that I passed out to you all. That handout lives in EdWorks. So for anybody who is not here tonight, pass along the word. They can access that in EdWorks. This session will be video recorded. So any of your peers that, again, we're not here can view it later. And I'm going to chat a little bit about our next two parts to this series that are coming up this semester after we're done. Okay, so stick around.
Okay. All right, well, I am glad to be here, and even on the snowy day, so thank you for coming in on the icy, snowy day. I know sometimes it's hard to get over here when you just want to be snuggled in your warm bed, so thank you for being here. And I'm very excited to talk about the portfolio process for the job search, and this is really optional to you. This is nothing that any of your instructors require by any means, but what we found is that it's been really useful for our graduates when they're on the job search and helping them get interviews, helping them get kind of the job that they want and marketing themselves really well. So that's why we kind of put together these series, and Laura is definitely your point person. She's wonderful, so make sure you take full advantage of the fact that we have Laura here for everything related to job search and things like recertification. As you're out in the field, she's a great resource for that. So today, I don't want to spend more time than we need to because I know many of you are student teaching and you're busy and totally exhausted. But I do want to kind of go through and kind of talk through things you should be thinking about as you're going into your lead teaching, because it's better to know now than after lead teaching when you kind of go, oh, I should have done that and I should have thought about it. So, and as Laura mentioned, you'll have access to these slides, but you can also access them by going to that tiny URL as well. And I'll put that back up at the end of the presentation as well. So you're welcome to follow along and go to that tiny URL or just kind of look up here as well. All right, so to get started, one of the things that I just wanted to emphasize is that when we ask the education organizations, how do people get the job that they aspire to and that they're looking for? One of the things that they've been saying over the last 5 years has been networking is really, really important. And not just networking, physically networking, but also online networking as well. They've been noticing that. So they definitely encourage pre-service teachers as they're student teaching to start thinking about different educational organizations that they want to be part of. So if they have not joined, the NCSS or NCTE, whatever your kind of subject specialty is, or where you're going to be highly qualified in, think about joining those organizations. They often are either free or a low cost for new teachers and pre-service teachers. I also recommend joining McCall, which is the Michigan Association for Computer Users in Learning, which is pretty much the state ed tech organization, and that's K-12 subject independent, and it's completely free for you to join that. But they do like to see that you're reaching out beyond just what you're doing in your classroom as part of the process, but it also networks you and connects you with so many administrators and teachers in the field, just to kind of get them to see who you are a little bit. So think about that and kind of keep that in mind as well. As far as ePortfolios go, I'm a big believer in the ePortfolio. I got my first teaching job because of my ePortfolio. Back then it was like the big paper portfolios that we put together. Now a lot of districts prefer having electronic portfolio. We finally have kind of moved into that. For many years they still kind of prefer the paper, but now they do enjoy seeing the ePortfolio. So I am a firm believer in it. At the same time, an electronic portfolio works a little bit differently than a paper portfolio. So some people choose to kind of create both, have a small paper portfolio that's kind of a supplement to what they have in their electronic portfolio. What are some things you can do with your portfolio once you put it together? You can definitely demonstrate that you kind of have these future-ready technology skills as a teacher. A lot of districts are looking for that. So immediately having an electronic portfolio that's well done will kind of market you in that way. It's definitely a get for the interview. If you have a wonderful ePortfolio, people will want to bring you in to talk to you and to meet with you. If you have a crummy one and it looks terrible, nobody's going to want to talk to you. So if you're going to do an ePortfolio, do it really well or don't do it at all. But I can say when I was on interviewing committees, when we would see a link on the resume to an ePortfolio, we'd always click on it and look at it. And if it was something that was really well done, we would bring them in for the interview. Even if it was someone who didn't quite fit what we were thinking that we wanted for that particular teacher, maybe they were missing a certain endorsement, we still would often bring them in if the portfolio was really well done, because that tells us a lot about the organization of the teacher, the ability of the teacher. Also, if you're looking outside of the state of Michigan for a job, or even in states, in parts of Michigan that are hard to get to easily within a short drive, this will allow you to kind of connect with them. Many school districts now ask you to develop portfolios for the review process within the district, so you can continue to use this even after you have the job that you are looking for, or if you want to switch jobs later on, it can be helpful too. And it also can be used to kind of extend the interview. So when you're done with the interview, yes, you absolutely can, have your ePortfolio there on your laptop or on your tablet, but you can also encourage them to look at it after you're done with the interview. So many different ways that you can use it. You'll also notice that when you see some of the sample ePortfolios today, that some of these teachers have chosen to kind of convert it to what they share with parents at the beginning of the year to introduce themselves. So it's a great way for parents to kind of get to know you in a professional manner and to see what you're all about as well. So you can use it that way too. So there's a lot of sample ePortfolios that we are giving you links to, and some are stronger than others. And what I absolutely would encourage you to do, if you're on the PowerPoint, feel free to kind of click through. But if you're not on your own, please do peruse these portfolios, because you really do want to be looking at them from an aesthetic perspective. One of the things to keep in mind with the portfolio is this is not about a learning process. So we emphasize so much in our courses that we're always learning, and it's a process, and we want it to be kind of ugly and messy. But in the portfolio, administrators don't want to see an ugly and messy portfolio. They don't want to see a lesson that failed in the portfolio. They don't necessarily want to see a video of you teaching and it kind of ends up being mediocre. That's not where we want to put this. So you really want to look at them. When you click on them, look at them for aesthetics. And I actually have kind of this little, on the next slide there, I have this little kind of handy evaluation tool that you can kind of think about. But you want to ask yourself some questions when you're looking at the portfolio. What is the initial impression, the 1-minute impression of the portfolio? Because administrators have no more than about 20 minutes to look at your portfolio max. So they're going to do a quick click through first, and they're looking at the aesthetics immediately. So what is the aesthetic reaction to that portfolio? What are you drawn to? What are you turned off from? Also, you're going to look at the images of the portfolio, and I'm going to take you into this to kind of show you what I mean. But you really want to be very selective about the images that you're using in your portfolio, because that's going to tell the story of who you are as a teacher, and it's also going to send a message to the district itself. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. And the same thing with the text. Keep in mind that nobody wants to read novels in the portfolio, so we want to be careful about how much information we're putting out on the portfolio. You really want it to be kind of a just enough information rather than overwhelming amounts of text. And then take a look at the lesson plans that are shared. Are they things you have to download? Anything you have to download, no administrator is going to look at. Just keep that in mind. Never have any downloads. Avoid the downloads. Everything should be embedded in the portfolio nicely. Also, you really want to think about having your absolute best lessons, and we'll talk about that. So rather than having entire units, picking out 3 or 4 really strong lessons seems to work well. So let me take you into a couple portfolios so I can emphasize a few things. So one of the things I mentioned was the images. So in this portfolio, and I'm not sure how well you can see it, but we have kind of two images here, and it's the same teacher. And in these images, when I look at these particular images, which one do you think might be a stronger image? An image that projects the read aloud? Why is that? Why are you drawn to the read aloud one? Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So in this particular picture here on the right, it looks, now we don't know, but it looks like the kids, all their heads are facing towards the book and the teacher. It looks as though she's captured their attention. Now we don't actually know. They could all be like giving her, you know, silly faces or something, but it looks right. It looks what the kind of look that an administrator would want to see. In the picture on the left, she is at the board and it looks like she's engaging with the student, but it almost looks like the student in the blue is not paying any attention to her. So it looks like she's kind of being ignored and maybe doesn't have command of the classroom that we would want to see. So your images really matter. That's something that administrator would notice immediately, is whether or not you have command of the classroom or that you're really engaging with the students in different ways. You do want pictures of yourselves with the students, so find a way to get those pictures. Ask your mentor teacher while you're doing your lead teaching to take pictures. Ask your field instructor when they come in to observe you to take pictures. Ask another peer pre-service teacher that's with you, another intern, if they will take pictures, and you can swap back and forth during different break times. But find a way to get as many pictures as you can, and pictures of yourself with the students and doing different types of activities with the students. In some portfolios, you'll notice that a lot of the pictures are just of the teacher, and that's not quite as powerful as actually showing them engaging in the teaching and learning. So as much as possible, trying to do that. So here's another image just to kind of compare again. So in this image, the teacher, you know, here she is at the board. It has kind of that look that the students are paying attention. You have a student raising their hand. It's a pretty strong image that it's projecting in there. So you want to pay attention to those pictures. Notice this one's a great picture right here. It looks like she's at the student's level. They're working together. She's paying attention to what he's reading. She's listening well. So again, really paying close attention to the images, noticing when you're doing different types of activities with students and trying to capture those images as much as possible. And you should be in the picture. So if I compare that to this one, so in this particular portfolio, the teacher put in a bunch of pictures, and a lot of these pictures are just of the students. And the students aren't being interviewed, the teacher's being interviewed. So they want to see you engaging with the students, with other teachers in collaborative ways. So it's lovely to get pictures of the students. Parents love to see that. But the administrator actually wants to see you engaging. And then you also want to be careful of the types of images you're putting in there. For example, this one is probably not the best choice of an image, just because it looks like they're kind of bored laying on their desk. I'm not sure what they're doing in there. Compared to, and this one's a much stronger image of the teacher reading to the students there. And here's another one that's a little bit stronger, where she's kind of leaning in, listening to this small group working. So keep in mind the images are really powerful. The images are important. Get as many as you can. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to interns in the end of March and April, and they'll say, oh, I didn't get very many pictures. So get them now. Have the device that you need to use to capture those images so that you have a lot to draw from. Especially if you feel as though it's a strong lesson that you're teaching and you might want to highlight that particular lesson. Make sure you're capturing not just the images of the students working on the lesson and you teaching it, but also some artifacts from the lesson itself, especially if they're producing something. So that's something we want to think about with the images in the portfolio. The other thing I mentioned is the text in the portfolio. So again, keeping in mind that you should be able to read through an entire portfolio in 20 minutes or less. 20 minutes or less is the rule. That's every single page of the portfolio. So when the portfolio has a lot of text happening in it, and let's see if I can find one Actually, I don't think Maddie's does. If I can find one. Okay, so here's one. Oh, Rebecca. So here's one where there's a lot of text happening, right? So if I turn to that as an administrator, I'm not going to read all that. That just seems like a little bit more than I have time to go through. Even though this is probably half of what her teaching philosophy was supposed to be for her class, it's still just too much for an administrator to take the time to read through. So there's a couple of things that you can do when you do want to put in a decent amount of text. One thing is you can highlight, and you'll notice some of the portfolio samples have done this. You can highlight certain words within the text that are meaningful to you as a teacher. So maybe it's differentiated instruction. Maybe it's, cooperative groups. Maybe it's collaboration. Maybe it's your work with ELLs. Whatever it might be, highlight, bold those so they stand out. So even if the administrator, even if the principal doesn't read the entire page that you have, they can see the things that are meaningful to you and that are important to you. So let's see if I can find a portfolio where they did a nice job kind of highlighting some things. Oh yeah, Kelsey did a nice job. So Kelsey did that right here. She's making a difference in her students' lives right there, see? Let's see. So here Maddie did a little bit of that where she broke it up and kind of said educating the whole child, differentiation. So just kind of highlighting things that you would see when you walk into her classroom. Let me see if I can find another. Again, drawing on pretty strong images for hers. So here's one where the teacher did do some highlighting. So she's emphasizing, she's a social studies teacher, so she's emphasizing her work with Big History Project. She was a project manager, human rights as essential problem in secondary classrooms, think aloud. So she's doing a little bit of that where she's just highlighting some of the features of her website, knowing that even if they don't read through the whole website, they'll at least maybe look at the different things that have been highlighted in there in different ways. So just kind of going back to having too much text. So I think this is a good example of also just being aware of just the colors that we're choosing, because this one's a little bit hard to see even on my computer, but also just being aware of how much text we're putting in there. She has important topics in here. She has a really strong statement, but there's so much text that's happening in here that it might be a little overwhelming. So again, thinking about keeping it short, keeping it to the point as much as possible. So there are quite a few examples in there. Feel free to peruse those examples. Look at them from an initial aesthetic perspective. Just as I click through this quickly, is this someone who seems like a strong professional and well organized and a nice clean portfolio? And then look at the images, look at the text, see how that is projecting for that particular teacher. So with that in mind, a couple of things. I want to talk about the specifics of what you want to include in your portfolio. The most popular sites for people to create portfolios have definitely been Weebly and probably Google Sites now because it's been improved a little bit. A few people have used Wix. You can use whatever you want to build your portfolio. Those are nice because in general they have nice professional looking templates. They're pretty simple to use for the most part. And there are things that are not proprietary to Michigan, so that once you're done here as a student, you'll always have access to it in the future. And so we already looked at the pictures a little bit, so I'm going to go over to the sections and pages. So what types of sections and pages would you want to have in a portfolio? One thing you want to keep in mind is you want it to be readable in 20 minutes, but you also don't want it to be sparse. So I'm going to share some of the different sections that you might want to think about having. Feel free to ask questions about them. It doesn't mean you have to have them. If you don't have anything for that section, then don't put anything in. So there's nothing worse than having a how I connect with home to school and then not really having much in there other than saying I email parents once in a while. So it's okay if you don't have anything, just don't include that section. If you want to include, you'll notice a lot of the portfolios have kind of a teaching philosophy or goals or vision. That's great, but make sure that it is kind of short and concise. definitely less than 1,000 words. Feel free to tell a story. Feel free to emphasize things of places where you might want to teach. So if you know you want to teach in an urban area, then don't tell a story about teaching in a rural farming community because that's not going to necessarily connect with the urban schools. So keep in mind that if you're telling your story a little bit about why you want to become a teacher or why you love teaching, try to include pieces in it that would connect with the types of schools that you are looking to get into. If you're pretty open, then you don't have to do that. But if you know you want to be in a certain area, a certain field, a certain level, especially if you are elementary certified and you know you absolutely want a K-1 classroom, then emphasize that in your story. Also, again, as I mentioned before, the whole highlighting the concepts and ideas for your teaching. So I already showed you that a little bit with, Kelsey did do it in her portfolio. So again, emphasizing the things that are really important, because I can look through this and say, she knows about culture relevant pedagogy, diversity is important to her, creative technology, she's looking about equity issues, and I might not even read the rest of it. But that tells me a lot about her just by eyeballing that really quickly. You absolutely should use quotes from your teaching evaluations. So you will get evaluations from your mentor teacher, you will get evaluations from your field instructor, sometimes from classroom instructors. If they say something about you that really highlights something unique and interesting about you as a teacher, put that in your portfolio. So here, Amanda put in a quote from her mentor teacher, which she wrote in her teaching evaluation. And so she put that right in there. And then there's also another quote down here from her field instructor as well that she put in there. So if somebody says something about you that really highlights, oh my gosh, Amanda, the way that she did the phonics unit was amazing. We've never seen anyone do that before. Put it in your portfolio, highlight it on the first page, highlight it, have a different quote for each subject area, have a different quote for each grade level you're teaching, however you want to do it. But look for those quotes and those moments that you can pull out of as much as possible. Professional credentials. So in your portfolio, you may want to consider putting in that you have certain professional credentials so that school districts know you are ready to go. So in here, you should get some kind of certificate when you graduate saying that your official teaching certificate is coming and you are ready to teach in the fall. So you can put that in your portfolio. You can just kind of state that you have that and that you will be ready to teach, because school districts don't want to hire somebody who is maybe questionable about whether or not they're going to be ready in the fall. If you're willing to share your transcripts in the sense of sharing the classes that you've taken that make you highly qualified in certain areas, schools like to know that. So if I'm hiring for social studies and I need someone for economics, I need to know that you've actually taken classes in that. You know your supply and demand. So I will be kind of looking at that, and I know a lot of school districts do like to look for that, especially at the secondary level. They do want to know that you've had courses in certain areas of your specialty. So you can have a section about achievements, and this makes you stand out in many ways. It also might be an in for the interview, because sometimes school districts are looking for the chess club supervisor, and that's really important to their district. You never know. I was a state golf champion, and that's how I ended up getting one of my first interviews, because they needed a boys varsity golf coach. So you just never know. So even if your awards and achievements maybe come from high school and they're not something that came from college, still put them in there. If you have a specialty, and it doesn't have to be sports related or even academic related, if it's more kind of music, fine arts, a hobby, you're really great at knitting, and maybe you're going to start the knitting club, maybe the school's looking for something like that. You just never know. If you aren't willing to do it, for example, if you're a marathon runner but you have zero interest in ever coaching a track and field, then don't put it in there. But if you think I might be willing to do something like that, then put in some of your achievements, let people see where you are a standout, and really think through that in a broad sense. It does not have to be if you only got track awards or only academic awards. Think about it much more broadly than that. Lesson plans are really important here. Of course, the administrators want to see the lesson plans that you're designing. It should be a lesson plan, not a unit, 3 to 4 max. You don't want any more than that. Your lesson plans should not be something they download. It should be something that they can see right there in the portfolio. I think this goes to Deniez's. So Deniez did a nice job setting up. So again, I really like this image. It's a great image she chose. But she talked a little bit about the math curriculum she worked with. So she talked about working with everyday math curriculum. And then she also talked about math journaling a little bit. And for some reason, these images are not coming in, but she used to have some images right here. This is an older portfolio where, and I think it's because I don't have the flash on my computer. But there were some images that were coming in, and they were images of the students doing their math journaling in different ways. So she really did a nice job connecting that. And you can also see she also highlighted some language in here as well. So, and when you're picking your lesson plans, pick the ones that are the absolute best that you want to highlight. So if you're an elementary teacher, you don't have to have a lesson plan in every subject area. That's not necessary. It's better to have your 3 or 4 best lesson plans. And if that means you have 3 math lesson plans and 1 ELA lesson plan, that's perfectly fine. But you want to highlight the best. Within the lesson plan, as much as you can, try to include images of the process of teaching the lesson plan, the products, if there's any products from the lesson plan. It can also be of things like work. Student work from the lesson plan. It can be a little bit about how you might assess. It might include things like rubrics. So thinking about not just the lesson plan template that you design for your field instructor and your mentor teacher, but kind of the nice artifacts that will go with that. Keep in mind also that your lesson plan should not be super long. So your lesson planning template often here, especially for the elementary program and depending on your subject area for secondary, can be very, very long. Again, administrators do not want to read a 5 or 6 page lesson plan. So you want to try to pare it down as much as you can. They want to know your learning goals, they want to know your process, they want to know your attention to learners, but some things like what can we do in supplement to this, what are extension activities, you can take things like that out. So you will want to kind of pare down the lesson plan. That's something that you can definitely work with your field instructor. When you come in, if you come into the March session for Portfolio Day, we can kind of help you pare that down as well if you need to kind of think through that. Do you have a question? Yeah, absolutely. Ask away.
Should we tailor lesson plans for what content area we're applying to? Like if you're applying for U.S. history positions, like doing only U.S. history lesson plans, or I also know like Google sites, like the examples seem to be Google sites that are secondary websites, and all the Weebly's are primary for elementary school. So I was wondering like what is the difference between those two?
So that's a good question. So I'll start with the first one. So if you know you only want to do U.S. history classes, then yes, tailor it to that. If it's more, well, I'm applying for U.S. history position for this one, but this one's for world history, don't do that. But you might want to just have kind of more of a broad spectrum of lesson plans. So have one that's more world history, have one that's U.S. history, have one that's maybe more anthropology, sociology, that type of thing, so that you can hit on different areas, if you're able to do that. Second question, I don't know why that's happened, to be honest, but we do tend to have our secondary teachers are more drawn to Google Sites. I think it's because a lot of secondary schools use the Google Suite and the Google Classroom, and so they're just pulling from that. I think that's where it came from. And more elementary teachers tend to use things like Weebly, but it doesn't mean you have to stick to that.
So would that recommendation hold on like your minor sociology? So mine's not in social studies, I'm a space science minor. Should I just have like a couple science lessons thrown in there? Because realistically I'm not going to get hired as an urban space science teacher rather than a history teacher. So should I how should I split that? Or should I have like, if I'm applying to a certain job, should I just pack it with science ones, other ones pack with business?
I would have one that is in your minor area then, especially if it's an area you're willing to teach. Then I would have one in your minor area. I think that would suffice. You could have a couple in your major area and then one in your minor. And then, let's see, videos. So again, in our program, we love videos because we love to use them to learn from and to analyze, but videos tend to not come across well in a portfolio because people tend to look for the bad in videos. They tend to look for the mistakes and the things that aren't going well. For example, I could be teaching the most phenomenal lesson and then everybody's gonna focus in on the one student that has his head down on his desk a little bit. But a picture, that doesn't happen as much if you choose the right picture. So you can control kind of the message a little bit more with pictures than with videos. The one place I have seen videos be successful is if it's a video of like the student work that the student created. So the students produced or created something for your project and you're sharing their video that they created and it's well done, then I would do that. That's fine. As a matter of fact, there's one video, let me go back a couple, that is, I think it was in Natalie's. So Natalie put in kind of a very creative video in hers. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's under citizen science, maybe. She put in a video where she did some, here it is. So what she did was she did kind of a quick fast forward of her lesson. So she explains her lesson. She explains what's happening in the lesson, what the students are doing, and then she just did, fast motion of the lesson happening so you can see how the students are doing the activity. So that, I think, is a really smart way to use the video. It's not focusing on her. And it's going so fast that I don't have time to look to see if anybody's sleeping in the corner. But in general, you don't have to worry about using any of your videos in it. So that's what's for your lesson plans. So you want to describe a little bit about your approach in your lesson plan, and then make sure you have some artifacts and the lesson plan itself, all of it kind of embedded together in the same place. And I would recommend having a different page for each lesson plan rather than scrolling all the way down, because I know the scroll down is very popular, but most administrators don't want us to do all the scrolling down. Creating a classroom community. So this is something that we see in a lot of the elementary portfolios, not so much in secondary, but when the administrators see it in secondary, they love it. So I'm just telling you that, they love it. So keep that in mind. If there are things you do, I was a social studies teacher, we used to do current events for the first 5 minutes, things like that where you're trying to create that classroom community, include that. Take some images of it, take pictures of it. If you put up bulletin boards of different things, take pictures of that. You're kind of different ways that you're connecting with the students. Also, you can include in that things like your pedagogical approaches. So here in Megan's, she included some information about how she approaches math workshops and develops community in her classroom through her math workshops, which was kind of a unique way to approach it. So keep that in mind as you're taking your pictures of yourself teaching, take pictures of your classroom too. If you're doing different decorations, different community-based activities, even if they're small, like I mentioned with the first 5 minutes with current events, small things like that just to show how you set up those norms and structures to build community in your classroom. If you don't do anything, then don't have this section. I hope that's not the case, but that's just the realist in me. Parent communication, again, this is something we see a lot in the elementary portfolios and not as much in the secondary portfolios. But when we see it in the secondary portfolios, it is loved because often parents are kind of left off a little bit in the secondary process. So if there are things you are doing, I know some teachers here have Twitter feeds, or they're doing blogs, or they're doing things with things like Seesaw or internal networks together, different ways that they are communicating and connecting with families and with students. You want to capture that. So you want to share what you're doing, take some screenshots of things that you can legally take screenshots of, and include that in there. If you are doing parent conferences, if you have those opportunities to do anything like that, if you have special forms that you're using or printouts that you're using, different ways that you're approaching your parent conference, include that. So different ways that you are connecting with families. I would recommend for the elementary set, if you did the home visits with Davy, that I would recommend including a little bit about that because that's very powerful too. So if you can. And if your parent communication is pretty simple, but it's also because of equity or access issues. I would share that too and say I've chose a parent communication based on the culture of the parents in my community and their needs and their access, because I'm very aware of equity issues and I want to be sensitive to that. So professional references, start asking now for professional references. Nobody wants to be asked a day or two before it's needed. Believe me, you don't want to do that. So former instructors that you've had here at the university, employers, ask them now, because you don't have to wait on those. So there's no reason why you can't start collecting those things now. So solicit some of those, your former placements that you've been in, if you did rounds, things like that, where you maybe made some connections with teachers. Absolutely feel free to ask now for those. And also, you will get, everybody expects to see a recommendation letter from the mentor teacher, from the field instructor. That's kind of a given. But when you can also get other teachers in your school to write you a recommendation letter, other teachers in the department, especially at the secondary level, ask them to come watch you teach when you're really confident you know you have a good lesson. Ask them to come watch you teach and give you a little bit of feedback. Same thing with administrators. Ask the principal to come in and watch you teach. It doesn't have to be on your first day of lead teaching, but ask them to come in at some point when you're comfortable and confident and you feel like you have a really solid lesson, and ask them to give you some feedback and maybe write a little something up for you.
So if you want to ideally apply for a job at the school that you're teaching at, I feel like it's weird to like ask the administrator or even other teachers. I feel like it would be weird to ask for a recommendation and then like apply to a job at that school. I don't know, what do you think?
So I think that's a good question. I think you can do kind of with the teachers in the building, I think you can say, will you come in, watch my lesson, give me some feedback on my lesson itself, and if the feedback is just glowing and really kind, you can say, would you mind if I use this in my portfolio? And I think that's perfectly acceptable, even if you're applying for a job as a second grade teacher and you had other second grade teachers come and watch you, because they know that it's more than their decision as to who gets hired. You know, there's a whole level thing where sometimes they might say, we want you, but then the district wants somebody else. I think that's okay. Administrator-wise, I would still invite the administrator in to come watch you teach when you have a great lesson. Maybe not use it in your portfolio if you're applying directly to that school. But definitely invite the administrator in. Parents, absolutely, if you've made connections with some parents, that can go a long way too, that you've connected with parents. So you can ask a parent you've connected with, will you write me a little letter of recommendation? Maybe you're tutoring a student. And the students at the elementary level tend to write like lovely little notes to their teachers. At the secondary level, you know, maybe you'll get a little corner of something in a paper. This class wasn't so awful, but but those unsolicited notes are from students in particular, especially at the secondary level, where they tend to not write you those notes. If they do say, I really like this, or thanks so much, or that was really cool, even if it's just a short little something, that's something I would pull and throw in my portfolio, because that is unsolicited. It came from them. They made a connection, and that says a lot about you as a teacher. So I know that sounds crazy. If the sub wrote a nice note about you saying, wow, this is a really impressive student teacher, throw that in there too. So think about those unsolicited ones as well as the ones that you're going out and asking for. So if you do get the little note in the corner, if a parent does share something with you, that can sometimes be even more powerful than the solicited ones. And then, I'll do a link to Ashley's here. So what Ashley did here, so here's something I want to say. If you're asking for a recommendation letter from anybody, a solicited one, you need to ask for permission to post it onto your website. So you cannot assume just because they're giving you a letter that you have their permission to post it. You need to be specific. I know many of my colleagues do not want their letter posted on the website, but what they are okay with is if you say, I will, letters of reference, I will, emailed upon request, so that they can email you and you will happily email it to them. But, and you can say who they are from often, but they don't necessarily want you to post the actual letter. So I believe what Ashley did in here is, I think she linked to, she linked to the actual letter. I'm not going to show that. But what I thought she did was, I thought she linked to actually a bio about the person a little bit, which I think is a smart idea. So you can kind of say the context of who it is a little bit further. But she did do a nice job kind of aligning. She has her evaluations in there. That's something, again, ask for permission to post that before you post it. And then you can choose if you want to post your certification scores, if they're just off the charts. And especially those of you in the highly qualified fields for elementary and for secondary, in your core subject areas, if you did really well in your core subject area, then that's actually a good thing to share that you did well in that. And then she has some feedback from her. No, it's not expected. It's not an expected thing. They will ask for it at some point. They will ask for it in the process, but you don't have to put it on your portfolio. That is totally your choice. Yes. Professional development. This is something often that's very sparse, but we don't want our graduates to be sparse in this area, so this is why we want you to be thinking about it now. There's probably things you've already done in professional development through maybe workshops in the district, maybe things at the beginning of the school year, maybe on Martin Luther King Day, where you have already participated in professional development. I know some of you volunteered to teach during the MLK Day symposium that Dr. Mears ran, and that would be a great thing to put in here. Also, any professional organizations, again, join those organizations, start connecting with them that you're connected with. If you've been able to attend any conferences, virtual or face-to-face, if there's webinars that you tend to watch about teaching and learning, share that, where you like to go for your professional resources. So schools want to know that you're greater than just what's happening in your classroom and you're not just shutting the door. And so they want to see that you're networking and connecting. You know, if you have a class Twitter account, whether it's yours or your teacher's, and you're helping your teacher with it, you can share that. If it's a lockdown account, then it's something where you can just share the link to the account and explain that it's locked down, or maybe you can grab an image from it that's appropriate and legal and then share that image in there. And is anybody a secondary Macker? These are my Mackers. All right. So my secondary Mackers, you are going to the McCall conference in March. I will see you there. And you want to definitely highlight that experience. So take some pictures of yourselves at the conference. So make sure you do highlight that. And that's a great place to do some networking as well. The presenters love for you to come talk to them and ask them questions. They absolutely do. So make sure you do that. So the last thing is the unique feature. So everything I've talked about in the portfolio so far are things that they kind of expect to see a little bit, some more than others. But the one thing that they don't expect to see, but they're always drawn to, is if you can highlight a unique feature, something that makes you unique and stand out. Yes, you're going to have a certain type of teaching certificate, so do 50 other candidates. Yes, you're going to have student taught in the school, so have all these other candidates. Yes, you're going to have designed these lesson plans, so have all these other candidates. You've done all these same things, but there are things that you can bring to the school that none of those other candidates can. And every single one of you has a unique feature. You might have to search for it, but you have it. And if you don't know what it is, ask your mentor teacher, ask your field instructor, ask your friends, ask your peers, your colleagues, your cohort mates, ask professors. They might see it in you and you don't even see it in you. So, and I'm saying that because it's not, you know, oh, my unique feature is I'm some super athlete. That could be it. I think Murphy had some of that in hers. But it might be the way, you know, I love doing virtual field trips, and we do the most amazing virtual field trips in our classroom. Maybe it's the way that you design homework. Maybe you do homework in a really interesting way or an engaging way. Maybe you do send some screencasts home that are very different, and the mentor teachers notice it, but maybe never said anything to you. Maybe it's that you created a little lunch bunch club for students that were maybe struggling a little bit making friends. So there are things, little gifts that you have that you can bring to the school that nobody else can. And that's the question you get to answer also when the interviewer says, well, why would we want to hire you over all these other candidates? You can say, well, you know what, I can do this and I can do that. And one of the teachers, I think it was Allison Lucas's portfolio, she is an artist, and then she also has a background in Spanish, and she's a really strong Spanish speaker, and so she would bring in Spanish and art into her classroom in almost every single unit that she did, which was really unique and interesting. So think about that. Think about your skill sets and what you can do to kind of bring that in. And again, ask people if you don't know, because you have something. You just have to kind of search for it and find it. And you'll notice that some of the portfolios, maybe I went to Allison's, I did. And this is where Allison talks a little bit about how she's brought art and her Spanish background into the classroom in different ways. And some of the other portfolios also highlight some of their unique features that they have as well. So just keep that in mind. And then a few don'ts. Don't include the entire unit. Nobody has time to read it. You can mention the unit. You can say, I designed a unit on X. That's great. But don't link to the entire unit, because they're not going to look at it anyways. Try to avoid having more than 10 pages or sections of the portfolio, having too much going on the page, too much writing and text. We talked about that. Make sure everything works and the links all work fine, and having the lesson plans being too long. So those are just some things to keep in mind as you're going through the collection process. Permission forms, very important. The permission forms that you have to do research with your students and to videotape them do not count for the portfolio. There should be, and Laura and I were just talking about this, there should be in your manual, your teacher ed packet, there should be a special permission form for ePortfolios. If you don't have it, you should be able to get it in the teacher education office. So you want to use those if you want to use students' pictures where they're identifiable, in other words, their face. So the pictures where we just saw the students, you know, on the ground watching a read aloud, and you just see the back of their head, we don't need permissions from those parents for that. But if you can, you know, look at a picture and identify the face of the student, then we do need permission for that. If it's something where you're only using maybe a couple of pictures of a certain student and you have the parent's email address, you can also email that parent the pictures and say, these are the pictures I want to use in my professional portfolio, this is how I'm going to use them, and have the parent email you back, and if they give you an affirmative and permission, then just hold on to that email, and that also counts as well. So you can use the forms or you can use email, but you do need permissions. So that's also why you want to be selective. If you know you're taking a picture and that student has a do not post, do not publish policy in general, I would try to avoid taking too many pictures of yourself teaching with that student for your portfolio, since you're not going to probably be able to use those images. So just keeping that in mind.
If we're posting, I'm sorry if I already said this, if we're posting images of student work and the work is like anonymous, do we need permission from that student's parents to post that?
No, as long as you cannot identify the student and there's no grade on it. So if there is like a grade on it, like 38 out of 40, just white out the grade part. Yeah, but you can show the write-up in the assessment piece. That's great. But we just don't want to break any FERPA laws there. So that is important. Just keep the permissions in mind. It's something you can send it out now, kind of a blanket form. For secondary, I always recommend pick the class that is kind of your, you know, the class that you get to every day where you're excited. It's third period. I love my third period. Pick that class and hand out the forms just in that class. Or if you have a couple of preps, pick the ones where you know they're the strongest. And so you don't have to hand out 100 forms. You can hand out, you know, 40 forms or 50 forms, and it's a little bit easier, more manageable. So with that said, are there any other questions about portfolios? At this point, your job is to just start collecting stuff. You don't necessarily have to be piecing everything together. You can. Some people like to piece and teach at the same time. But at this point, you just want to start collecting pictures. You want to start thinking about which lesson plans you might want to highlight as you're designing those lesson plans and making sure you're actually capturing artifacts from them. So just have a folder on your computer where you're just dumping everything into it, and then you'll be able to start to sort through it. It kind of more like the beginning of March as you've gotten through some of your lead teaching so that you have something to work with, and you'll know what types of sections you want and don't want. If you want to put anything in the portfolio yet, you can definitely throw up kind of a philosophy or a home or a welcome to get it started, but a lot of things you're going to have to wait for. You also can draw from other semesters. So I mentioned the home visits. for the elementary group. If there's things you've done in other semesters with rounds or anything else where you got to teach a lesson that went really well, or you got to work with parents or a unique community, absolutely feel free to highlight those. It doesn't just have to be student teaching semester. Any other questions? I'm always happy to look at a portfolio. If you want to email it to me, I am on sabbatical, but I'll be happy to look at the portfolio from where I'm at and give anyone feedback that would like to have feedback. So feel free to do that. I don't know if my email's on here, but I'll put it on here. And Laura wants to share about the next 2 sessions that are coming up.
Just to clarify, because there's a lot of different pieces to the series. So obviously this was the intro, just to kind of go over the overview of what to include, get ideas started. Then on March 21st, we're going to have 2 SOE lecturers and their former, current administrators in the local area be on site here to just in a very informal setting. You can show them what you have started. It could be 1 page on your ePortfolio. It could be the structure that you have. Just come with your laptop and something, right? That session's not for like this, going over basics. But if you have in-progress work, that's what March 21st is for. Then our final event, which is 2 parts, is on April 4th. The first part is a one-on-one formal review of your completed ePortfolio with a local administrator. We're talking principals, assistant principals, associate superintendents, like big name people. There's only 12 spots, and I checked Edwards, and there are 3 people signed up so far. So I would sign up as soon as you can, because that's an incredible opportunity. And just the kicker there is that you have to sign up with a URL to your ePortfolio. You just need it doesn't need to be complete right now, obviously, but you just need to create that portfolio link so we know you're kind of committed to doing this. And as soon as you sign up, we will expect you on April 4th. Please do not back out, because we will send your ePortfolio to the administrator in advance so they can look over it and have feedback prepared for you. I know it might sound scary, but let me tell you, these reviewers are amazing people. They get so excited to come here on that night, and they're very supportive. They will give you real, honest feedback as it pertains to the teacher job search. So even if you're not looking to get hired in this area, still I would take advantage of this opportunity, because I know some students last year did, and they had their eyes set on like Chicago, and they said it was incredibly valuable for their job search to participate. So that's that portion of the one-on-one review on April 4th. And then the last part of that event is just going to be a panel where we're going to take all of those reviewers, put them on a panel, and then anyone can attend that to just ask questions to the panel about what they think about ePortfolios and how it factors into the job search. Okay, so for those of you who aren't really sold on the ePortfolio idea, you can still attend that panel.
Yeah. And that has been, every intern that has gone through and done the April 4th has said it's been incredibly valuable. And it really is, you don't get a lot of chances to sit down one-on-one with a superintendent or with a principal and to get their full undivided attention. And they give amazing feedback on the portfolio, the interview process. Right.
First-hand advice.
Yes. And the walk-in one, as Laura said, you don't have to have a finished portfolio. If you have questions about the process, if you're trying to decide between images and things you want to do, that's the time to come in and ask those questions.
I sent out a very detailed email, I'm sorry it was so long, probably yesterday, about all 3 events, to just try to give you all the information up front. Please email soe.careerservices, though, if you have any questions about the events, okay? We'll make sure to clear that up. If you didn't sign in with your M card, come find me over there, okay? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.